On a desolate stretch of highway, under the oppressive weight of a storm-laden sky, a lone driver squinted through the relentless downpour. The rhythmic thud of windshield wipers battled against the sheets of rain, offering fleeting glimpses of the road ahead. Lightning fractured the darkness, illuminating the silhouette of a figure standing by the roadside. A woman, drenched, her white dress clinging to her form. Compelled by a mix of concern and curiosity, the driver eased his vehicle to a stop beside her. She slid into the passenger seat without a word, the scent of rain and something indefinably ancient accompanying her. Her face, pale and serene, turned toward him as she whispered an address. An old house on the outskirts of town. The journey continued in near silence, the car's interior filled only with the sound of rain pelting the roof and the occasional rumble of distant thunder. Each time the driver stole a glance, she sat motionless, her gaze fixed ahead, an enigmatic presence beside him. As they approached the destination, the driver turned to inform her, only to find the seat empty. A chill gripped him as his eyes dropped to the damp seat, where a small, delicate scarf lay, a token of her ephemeral presence. Determined to unravel the mystery, he clutched the scarf and approached the weathered house. An elderly woman answered his hesitant knock, her eyes widening at the sight of the familiar fabric. With a trembling voice, she recounted a tale that sent shivers down his spine. Her daughter had perished in a tragic accident on that very road, decades prior. Every year, on the anniversary of her death, she returned, seeking the way home. The driver stood in stunned silence, the weight of the revelation pressing down upon him as the storm raged on. The trees loomed tall and motionless, their skeletal branches clawing at the sky. The forest swallowed the last remnants of daylight as the Carter family's SUV rumbled up the gravel driveway, the tires crunching over the brittle remains of fallen leaves. The cabin stood at the end of the path, its dark wood weathered, its windows reflecting the golden glow of the setting sun. Lisa Carter murmured, stepping out of the car and stretching. She inhaled the crisp autumn air, tinged with the scent of pine and damp earth. Her husband, Greg, killed the engine and helped their two children, Owen and Emily, gather their bags. The cabin had been listed as a secluded getaway. No Wi-Fi, no cell service, just the vast wilderness surrounding them. The rental owner, an older man with hollow eyes and a voice like rusted hinges, had handed Greg the keys with an odd warning. "It's best if you don't go wandering at night. Sound carries strange out here." Greg had chuckled at the time, brushing it off as the eccentricities of an old man too familiar with the isolation of the woods. Inside, the cabin smelled of old wood and the faint trace of something Greg couldn't quite place. Something metallic, maybe. It was rustic but cozy. A stone fireplace, a few worn rugs, a rocking chair by the window that creaked when the wind blew. Emily, the younger of the two kids, ran upstairs, claiming the loft bedroom. Owen, ever the skeptic at 13, rolled his eyes at his sister's enthusiasm but followed her up nonetheless. As the evening stretched on, the family settled into the cabin's embrace. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows on the walls. They played board games by candlelight, laughed over burnt marshmallows, and for the first time in months, Greg felt a sense of peace, a break from the suffocating monotony of suburban life. Then the first whisper came, soft, barely perceptible, a hushed breath curling through the wooden walls like a draft, slipping between the cracks and settling in the room like a living thing. Lisa frowned, setting down her mug. "Did you hear that?" Greg looked up from his book. "Hear what?" She shook her head, dismissing it. "Nothing, I guess." But later, when the house had fallen into a hush of deep sleep, the whispers returned. Greg woke to the sound of his name. It came from the walls, a voice like dry leaves rustling in a hollow space. "Greg!" He sat up, heart pounding. The room was dark except for the dying embers in the fireplace. He turned to Lisa, but she was deep in sleep, undisturbed. Then he heard it again. "Greg, help!" A chill traced his spine. The voice was low, barely audible, but unmistakably real. He swallowed hard, throwing his legs over the edge of the bed. He didn't know why, but something about the voice felt urgent, desperate. He grabbed the flashlight from the nightstand and crept toward the source of the sound. It led him downstairs. The cabin's wooden floors groaned beneath his weight as he descended. The air felt colder, thicker. The whispering grew stronger, pulling him toward the farthest corner of the house, toward the basement door. Greg hesitated. He hadn't noticed it before, hadn't even thought about the cabin having a basement. The door was old, its hinges rusted, a single iron latch keeping it shut. He reached out, fingers trembling, and unhooked the latch. The door swung open with a long, shuddering creak. The basement yawned below, a dark void stretching into unseen depths. The whispers curled up from the darkness, wrapping around him like unseen fingers. Then a sound. Something shifted in the basement. Something alive. Greg's breath hitched. He lifted the flashlight, its beams slicing through the blackness, illuminating the wooden stairs leading downward. Dust motes danced in the air. The smell was stronger now, damp, metallic, and something else, something rotting. And then he saw them. Faint, jagged scratches lined the walls. Deep, desperate claw marks carved into the wood as if something or someone had tried to claw their way out. The whispers turned into a wail. A sudden gust of wind howled through the cabin, slamming the basement door shut behind him. Lisa woke with a start. The fire had gone out, leaving the room in an eerie hush. She turned, reaching for Greg, only to find his side of the bed cold and empty. A creak echoed from downstairs. She sat up, pulse quickening. Greg! No answer. Something felt wrong. The air was thick with a suffocating stillness. Slipping out of bed, Lisa grabbed her phone, but as expected, no signal. She crept downstairs, the floorboards moaning beneath her cautious steps. The living room was empty. The front door was locked. The only thing out of place was the basement door. It stood ajar. Greg! Her voice barely rose above a whisper. The silence pressed in. With trembling hands, she reached for the door and peered inside. Nothing but darkness. A chill slithered down her spine. And then, just as she turned to leave, she saw it. Faint and shrouded in shadow, but unmistakable. A handprint smeared against the inside of the basement door. A handprint made from the inside. The next morning, when the police arrived, they found Lisa in shock, sitting on the cabin porch, whispering Greg's name over and over again. Inside, the basement was empty. No signs of a struggle. No sign of Greg. Just the claw marks in the walls, stretching deep into the wood, as if someone had been trying to escape. As if they had been trapped inside for a very, very long time. The police searched the cabin from top to bottom. They checked every floorboard, every crevice, and every inch of the basement. No sign of Greg. No trace of where he had gone. Lisa, still trembling, repeated what she had heard. How he had followed the whispers, how he had gone down the basement steps, and how he never came back. Detective Alan Graves, a grizzled man with years of experience dealing with disappearances in the woods, surveyed the basement with a furrowed brow. His flashlight traced the deep claw marks in the walls, the frantic scratches that trailed up toward the ceiling. He had seen animal damage before, bears, raccoons, even mountain lions, but this was different. These were human fingernails that had torn at the wood. And then there was the handprint, smudged against the inside of the basement door, a perfect outline of a human palm, except for one thing. The fingers were too long. 2 weeks later, Lisa and the children left the cabin that night, staying in a motel on the outskirts of town while the authorities continued their search. The cabin's owner, a man known only as Mr. Holloway, was contacted, but his response was strange. If he went missing in the basement, then he's already part of it now. The police pushed for clarification, but the old man only shook his head and refused to say more. Search teams combed the surrounding woods. Helicopters circled above. Cadaver dogs sniffed the earth, leading officers toward the cabin again and again, but they never found a body. The whispers, however, continued. 3 weeks later, Lisa had moved back to her sister's house with the children, unable to return to the life they once knew. The nights were the hardest. She would wake in the middle of the night, gasping for breath, convinced that she had heard Greg's voice calling from the walls. Lisa. One night, she jolted awake to a familiar sound. Scratching, faint, rhythmic, deliberate, came from the bedroom wall. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Slowly, she reached out, fingers trembling, and pressed her palm against the cold wood. Silence. Then, "Let me out," Lisa screamed. The house was searched again. Contractors ripped open the drywall, checking for any hidden compartments or damage from animals. What they found left them pale and shaking. Buried within the walls, lining the space between the insulation and the wooden beams, were dozens of old, brittle fingernails. Human fingernails, as if something or someone had been trapped inside for a very long time. 1 month later, the whispers never stopped. Owen refused to sleep with the lights off. Emily wouldn't speak at all. Lisa barely ate, barely slept, spending her nights sitting in front of the television, its static hum filling the empty void of silence. Then, one evening, there was a knock at the door. She hesitated before opening it. A man stood outside, his skin pale, his eyes sunken. He held an old, yellowed folder in his hands. "You don't know me," he said, voice hoarse. "But I know what happened to your husband." Lisa felt her breath catch. "Who are you?" The man glanced over his shoulder, as if making sure no one had followed him. Then he leaned in. "I used to be a cop. I worked a case like this before. In that cabin." Lisa's hands tightened around the doorframe. "What case?" The man took a slow breath. "The last time someone went missing in that cabin," he said, "was 30 years ago. Father just like yours. He disappeared. And his family kept hearing his voice. They tore down the basement walls looking for him. You know what they found?" Lisa shook her head, her throat too tight to speak. The man swallowed. "They found his wedding ring, inside the wood, like the walls had absorbed him." Lisa recoiled. "That's impossible." The man nodded grimly. "I thought so too." He hesitated before pulling something from the folder. A photograph. It was old and grainy, taken decades ago inside the very same cabin. It showed a section of the basement wall, where deep, desperate claw marks stretched up toward the ceiling. But it wasn't the scratches that made Lisa's blood run cold. It was what lay beneath the wood. Faces, dozens of them, distorted, half-formed, frozen in expressions of silent agony. Their features barely visible beneath the grain of the wood, as if the cabin itself had swallowed them whole. The man handed Lisa one final piece of paper. A newspaper clipping from 1943. "Family vanishes without a trace. Local authorities close investigation at Holloway cabin." Lisa's knees nearly gave out. "Don't go back," the man whispered. "Don't listen when he calls." Then he turned and left, disappearing into the night. Lisa stood in the doorway, staring at the photograph, her breath shallow. And then, faintly, from within the walls of her own house, she heard it. "Lisa, let me out." The Whispering Cabin, Part 3. Lisa slammed the door, her heart hammering. The photograph trembled in her grip as her mind raced. This wasn't just a missing persons case anymore. The cabin wasn't just a place. It was something else, something alive. She turned, expecting to see her children asleep in the living room. But Owen was standing in the hallway. His face was pale, his small hands clenched at his sides. "Mom," he whispered. "Dad's here." Lisa's breath caught. What did you say?" Owen turned his head slightly, as if listening to something just behind the wall. "He's talking to me." His voice was eerily calm. "He says he can see us." Lisa felt the room spin. "Sweetheart, you." "He's in the walls, Mom." The air grew thick, oppressive. The house groaned around them, the wooden beams settling with deep, aching pops. Lisa felt sick. Then Emily began to whisper. Lisa turned sharply. Her daughter stood in the corner of the room, facing the wall, her fingers tracing the old wooden panels. Her voice was low, rhythmic, like she was speaking in time with something unseen. "Emily," Lisa's voice wavered. "What are you doing?" Emily's fingers stilled. She turned her head slowly, her eyes dark and unfocused. "He says he's hungry." The lights flickered. The whispers swelled. No longer just a faint presence in the walls, but something living, breathing, growing. Lisa grabbed Owen's hand and rushed toward Emily, pulling her away from the wall. "We're leaving," Lisa gasped, her voice barely above a whisper. But as she turned toward the front door, she froze. The hallway stretched longer than it should have, the doorway impossibly far away. The wood beneath her feet pulsed, like a heartbeat buried beneath the floor. The walls swayed, shifting, reshaping themselves as if the house was breathing. Lisa's stomach clenched. Something wasn't right. And then she saw it. At the far end of the hallway, just beyond the flickering light, stood a shadow. It was tall, stretched unnaturally thin, its form merging with the dark wooden walls. Its arms were long, its fingers too sharp, but it was the face, or lack of one, that sent ice crawling through Lisa's veins. No eyes, no mouth, just smooth, featureless wood, as if the thing had grown from the cabin itself. And then took a step forward. Lisa let out a strangled cry, shoving her children behind her. The air turned suffocating, thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. The whispers became deafening, overlapping, rising into a frenzied chorus of voices pleading, screaming. "Lisa, help, let me out, let me out." The thing took another step. Its wooden limbs groaned like an old tree bending in the wind. The walls shuddered as it moved, the cabin itself warping, shifting. Lisa grabbed Owen and Emily, yanking them toward the door. But the more she ran, the farther it seemed. And then, the thing raised its arm. Fingers lengthened, stretched, splintered, and it pointed directly at her. A deep voice, resonating from the very bones of the house, whispered one final word. "Stay." The floor beneath Lisa cracked. Wood splintered, the ground collapsing beneath her feet. She screamed as she fell. Then, light, cold air, the sensation of rain on her skin. Lisa gasped, her body hitting damp grass. The sound of the whispers vanished. The weight of the air lifted. She was outside. The house was gone. She scrambled to her feet, her breath ragged. Owen and Emily lay beside her, dazed but unharmed. And in front of them, the cabin, still standing, still untouched. But the front door was missing. The windows, dark and empty, stared back at her like hollow eyes. The house had spit them out, rejected them. Lisa's legs trembled beneath her as she gathered her children, stumbling backward toward the car. She didn't look back as she threw open the doors, shoved Owen and Emily inside, and turned the key with shaking fingers. The engine roared to life. The headlights cut through the dense fog as Lisa slammed on the gas, gravel spitting beneath the tires as they tore down the road. The cabin disappeared behind them, but the whispers lingered, in the back of her mind, in the bones of her memory, and in the faint, distant sound of fingers still scratching inside the walls. 1 year later, Lisa never spoke of the cabin again. She moved to a new city, changed her number, blocked out the past as best she could. Owen stopped talking about the voices. Emily started speaking again, but there was a quiet sadness in her eyes that never faded. But sometimes, late at night when the world was still, Lisa would wake to a familiar sound. A whisper, soft, insistent, crawling through the walls. Lisa sat up in bed, heart pounding. The sound was unmistakable. Soft, rhythmic, fingertips dragging against wood. The same sound from that awful night. The same sound that had haunted her dreams for a year. Her breath hitched. This wasn't a nightmare. It was real. She turned toward the bedroom door, pulse hammering in her throat. The house was dark, the only light spilling from the hallway where a dim nightlight cast eerie, stretching shadows. She strained her ears. The whispering was faint now, almost playful. Lisa, her stomach clenched. No, it wasn't possible. She had left that place. She had escaped. But then, why did it feel like something had followed? A soft rustle came from down the hall. Lisa's body moved before she could think. She threw the covers back, feet hitting the floor silently as she crept forward. The air in the house was heavy, charged, like the weight of a storm pressing in from all sides. She stopped at Owen's door, barely daring to breathe. Slowly, she turned the handle. The door creaked open. Moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting silver light over the small bed. Owen lay curled on his side, his chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. Lisa exhaled shakily. But as she stepped back, a whisper from inside the room. Her body went rigid. Her gaze flicked to the closet. The door was ajar. A thin sliver of darkness peered back at her. Lisa's breath came fast, shallow. Every instinct screamed, "Don't open it." But she had to, for Owen. With slow, trembling fingers, she reached out, gripped the handle, and pulled. The door swung open. Darkness yawned before her, deep and endless. And then, a hand, pale, too long, crawling from the shadows. Lisa's scream lodged in her throat as the fingers flexed, reaching toward her, nails clicking against the wood. "Mom!" Owen's sleepy voice shattered the moment. The hand vanished. Lisa blinked. The closet was empty. Nothing but hanging clothes and scattered toys. Her pulse slammed against her ribs as she staggered backward, gripping the doorframe for support. "Mom!" Owen murmured again, rubbing his eyes. "What's wrong?" Lisa forced a smile, though her hands still trembled. "Nothing, sweetheart," she whispered. "Go back to sleep." She shut the closet door tight. As she turned to leave, something made her pause. On the floor, just beneath the closet door, small, thin scratch marks carved into the wood. Her stomach turned. She hurried out, shutting Owen's door behind her. But as she retreated down the hallway, she swore she heard something behind her. A whisper, a laugh, and the faint, unmistakable sound of scratching. Weeks passed. Lisa tried to ignore it. The sounds, the fleeting shadows, the sensation of being watched. But the signs were undeniable. Emily had started whispering in her sleep again. Owen's closet door never stayed shut. And at night, when the world was silent, Lisa would wake with the unshakable feeling that something, stood just outside her bedroom door. Then, one night, Emily woke screaming. Lisa bolted from bed, heart hammering. She nearly tripped as she tore down the hallway, throwing open Emily's door. The girl sat upright, tears streaming down her face. Lisa rushed to her side. "What happened? What's wrong?" Emily sobbed into her chest. He came back," she choked. Lisa's blood ran cold. "Who?" Emily's fingers dug into Lisa's arms. "The man in the walls." Lisa's heart stopped. Emily lifted her tear-streaked face, voice trembling. "He said we should never have left the cabin." The room swayed around Lisa. The air grew thick, suffocating. Then, a sound. A crrrrtch. Soft, slow. From behind the wall. Emily gasped. Lisa turned. The closet door was open. The darkness inside shifted, and something stepped out. A tall, faceless shadow. The wood creaked beneath its weight. Its limbs groaned like bending branches. And as Lisa's breath hitched, it lifted one long, splintered finger and pointed right at her. The whispers exploded into a chorus of voices. Lisa grabbed Emily and ran. She barely registered Owen bolting from his room, barely noticed the tears streaking his face as she snatched his hand and yanked him down the hallway. The walls groaned. The floor shook. The house was alive. Shadows slithered from the corners. Hands reached from the walls. The thing followed, its movements slow, deliberate. "Stay." The word oozed from the walls themselves, reverberating in Lisa's skull. The front door just ahead. She lunged. A hand shot from the wall, fingers curling around her ankle. Lisa screamed, kicked. The grip loosened. She burst through the door out into the night. Cold air hit her like a wave. She staggered forward, clutching her children, gasping, sobbing. The house stood behind them, dark and silent. No movement, no whispers. But then, Owen turned. His small voice trembled. "Mom!" Lisa followed his gaze. The front door. still open. And inside the house, the hallway stretched impossibly long. At the far end, deep in the shadows, the figure stood waiting, watching. Lisa's breath hitched. Then, the door slammed shut, and the whispering finally stopped. Lisa never went back. She moved her family across the country to a place with no forests, no cabins, and for a while the whispers faded. But sometimes, on the edge of sleep, she swore she could still hear it. A soft, familiar sound. Scratch, scratch, scratch. And in the silence that followed, a voice, smiling, waiting. Stay. The past was supposed to be behind her. Lisa had done everything right. She changed her number, left no forwarding address, burned every single reminder of that place. And for a while, she let herself believe it was over. Until the night she found the note. It was waiting for her in the kitchen, propped neatly against the coffee pot. A single piece of paper. No creases, no smudges. Just 5 words, written in a child's uneven scrawl. You should never have left. Lisa's stomach clenched. Her hands trembled as she picked up the note. The paper felt wrong. Too thin, too dry. And then, a whisper, right behind her. Lisa spun, heart pounding, but the kitchen was empty. Only the steady hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. The house was quiet. Her children were asleep. But something felt off. She turned back to the note, stared at the jagged handwriting. Her mind raced. Emily couldn't have written this. Owen wouldn't have. Then who? A cold realization gripped her. The note wasn't just placed here. It was left here, which meant something had been in her house. Her legs went weak. She gripped the counter, swallowing down the rising panic. She had to think, had to be rational. It's a prank, she told herself. A cruel joke. But then, a soft tap-tap-tap echoed from the walls. Lisa's breath hitched. No, 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 no. She wasn't in that cabin. She had left. She had escaped. Hadn't she? The tapping came again. Closer. More deliberate. And then, the closet door in the hall creaked open. Lisa froze. She didn't want to look. Didn't want to see. But something moved in the darkness beyond that door. Something that had never left. And then, the whisper. Stay. The lights flickered. The room grew smaller. Lisa wanted to run. But deep down she knew there was nowhere left to go. Lisa's breath came in shallow gasps. The whisper curled through the air like smoke, slithering past her ears, inside her skull. She took a step back. The hallway stretched before her, impossibly long, impossibly dark. And at the far end, just beyond the cracked open closet door, it stood. Not a man, not a shadow, something else. Its limbs were wrong, twisted, too long. His head tilted, listening. Lisa's stomach twisted. The air in the house thickened. The walls breathed. A memory crashed into her like a wave. The cabin. The scratching inside the walls. The thing that had taken Mark. The thing that had followed them. Her body screamed run. But her feet wouldn't move. The lights flickered. The whispering grew. More voices now. Soft. Beckoning. Not just one. Hundreds. Lisa's knees buckled. She squeezed her eyes shut, heart hammering against her ribs. This isn't real. Can't be real. Then, Owen screamed. Lisa's eyes snapped open. His voice wasn't coming from his room. It was coming from inside the walls. Lisa's body moved before her mind could catch up. She lunged for the closet. The darkness inside yawned wide, stretching beyond logic, beyond space. And there, deep within, Owen. His small hands clawing at the wood. His mouth open in a silent, terrified scream. The thing had him. Lisa's stomach dropped. Without thinking, she reached in. Cold fingers clamped around her wrist. Lisa screamed. The grip tightened, pulled. The walls groaned, bending inward, swallowing them whole. Lisa gasped, twisting, fighting. And then, a voice. Low, hollow. You were never meant to leave. The room collapsed. Darkness rushed in. Lisa's world vanished. Silence. For a long time there was nothing. No sound. No light. Just emptiness. Then, a whisper. Soft. Familiar. Lisa's eyelids fluttered. She was lying down. Something warm pressed against her side. She turned her head. Owen. Emily. Both curled beside her, asleep. Her throat tightened. She was in a bed. A room. The walls were wrong. Dark wood. A single, flickering light bulb swinging overhead. A place she knew too well. The cabin. Lisa's blood ran cold. She threw the blankets back, pulse hammering. No, this wasn't possible. She had left. They had escaped. She stumbled to her feet, heart slamming against her ribs. Her hands trembled as she reached for the door. It swung open. And there, waiting in the hallway, Mark. Lisa's breath caught in her throat. Her husband stood motionless, his eyes dark, empty, but his lips curled into something familiar. A slow, unnatural smile. "Welcome home," he whispered. Behind him, the walls began to move. And from the darkness beyond, the whispering began again. Lisa's mind screamed, but no sound left her lips. Mark stood there, his grin stretching too wide, too unnatural. His eyes, once warm, were now black pits, empty, hollow. Behind him, the walls shuddered. Something moved beneath the wooden panels, pressing outward, as if the cabin itself were breathing, alive. Owen stirred behind her, his small voice barely a whisper. "Mommy!" Lisa turned, her hands trembling. Emily sat up, rubbing her eyes. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. They had to get out. Now. Lisa grabbed her children's hands and yanked them toward the door, toward Mark. His grin didn't falter, his head tilted, and in the dim, flickering light, Lisa saw it. His shadow. It wasn't his. It was too tall, too thin. It stretched unnaturally across the wooden floor, its fingers, clawed and reaching. Lisa's breath caught. Mark took a step forward. The walls groaned. The whispers rose. Lisa moved on instinct, shoving Owen and Emily toward the hallway, away from him. Mark's head snapped toward her, the black pits of his eyes widening. "You belong here," he whispered. His voice wasn't his. It was the cabin's. Lisa's stomach lurched. She yanked the kids toward the hallway, her heart slamming against her ribs. The moment they stepped over the threshold, the floor split open. A jagged, gaping void tore through the wood, stretching wide beneath Mark. A shriek, not human, ripped through the cabin. Lisa turned, just in time to see Mark's body snap backward. His mouth, open in a silent scream, vanished into the darkness. And then, the floor sealed itself, as if he had never been there. Emily sobbed. Owen clung to Lisa's waist, shaking. But there was no time to process. No time to mourn, because the whispers weren't stopping. They were getting louder. Lisa ran. The hallway stretched. The doors on either side rattled violently. Hands pounded from inside them. A voice, guttural, ancient, boomed from the walls. "You cannot leave." Lisa reached the front door. Her fingers clawed at the knob, locked. She slammed her fist against the wood. "Owen, Emily, help me." The children pressed against the door, pushing, crying. The whispers peaked. And then, a single sound cut through the chaos. A knock. Lisa's body froze. Came from the other side. A slow, deliberate knock. The cabin lurched. Lisa's vision blurred. For a split second, she saw the outside world. The road, the rain, the life they had left behind. Then, a second knock. The air cracked. Lisa threw her entire weight against the door. It burst open. Blinding light swallowed them whole. Silence. For a long time, Lisa lay still. The ground beneath her was cold, hard, concrete. Her body trembled, her skin damp with sweat. Slowly, she opened her eyes. Parking lot. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The gas station. Lisa's breath came in uneven gasps. Emily and Owen huddled beside her, their eyes wide with confusion. They were out. It was over, or so she thought. Because when Lisa turned toward the convenience store's glass doors, she saw it. The cabin. its reflection staring back at her. And from within the glass, a whisper, "See you soon."